Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest in our series of speaker interviews. My pleasure today to have with me Joe Garner, who's the chair of the UK government's Future of Payments Review. Joe will be joining us and giving a keynote address at the Payments Regulation and Innovation Summit, which is being held in London on the 25th of January. Joe, welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Very good to have you with us. And of course, we want to focus on your review, which was published not so long ago. Can you tell us why this was a good time for a review to be had? Why did the government want to have the review? And what did you hope to address as part of your review?
Right. Well, the genesis for this work was really a question in the Chancellor's mind around where do we stand in the UK today in terms of the most important retail payments journeys, and critically, how well set up are we to succeed in the future? Because you can't have a world-leading economy unless you've got a world-leading payments infrastructure. And I guess the question, a little bit behind the question, was, are we falling behind in the UK? We have historically at times been a real leader and innovator. Is that still the case today? So that's how I interpreted the questions that we were set as part of this work.
Okay, and what were the main conclusions that you had from it in terms of looking at the good stuff, looking at the bad stuff? What the conclusions you reached, very broadly?
Well, so starting with the good news and starting with the here and now, the first bit of good news is when it comes to paying for goods and services in person in the UK, we're really about as good as it gets. Why? Because we've got a very high banked population, a very high debit card population, early and widespread adopters of contactless payments, and continued innovation with things like soft POS and now widespread adoption of Apple and Google wallets, which means that when it comes to paying for goods and services via contactless, it's about as good as it gets. The other good news is when it comes to buying things online, ditto. And again, we've got some of the highest penetration of digital wallets in this country of anywhere in the world. So looked at through a consumer lens, it's a really positive story. The flip side of that, and the perhaps not so good news, is number one, while the consumer's getting a great experience, merchants and retailers are understandably concerned and in some cases quite frustrated about the costs that they perceive that they have to pay to the card schemes. The other bit of not so good news is when it comes to person payments, if I want to send you money, particularly with declining usage of cash, the process is just about okay. It's a bit clunky. There's sort codes, there's account numbers, and our attempt to put a better interface on the front of that with PayM didn't work. So whilst it's okay today, unless we innovate in that space, I think in a few years' time, the UK is going to start looking a little bit old-fashioned.
So really a mixed bag. Right? You talk there about the economics of it in terms of merchants and so on. How do you see open banking developing and moving to a more sustainable commercial model rather than a compliance-based model?
Well, one of the key conclusions of this review is that open banking has the potential to play a really significant role in addressing both of those bits of bad news. Because open banking, it has had quite a long and difficult birth, but it is now out there. And I was really impressed through the process of this work with some of the open banking supported journeys that are now coming to market, both from large incumbent players and from emerging fintechs. And I believe that subject to a few interventions, open banking could provide an alternative to the card schemes for retailers and merchants in time, and in doing so, it will also help address person-to-person payments. But in many ways, I think for that to happen, the most important conclusion of this review is more to do with the future. And the second part of the Chancellor's question, how well set up are we for success? Because when we looked at the payments landscape, we found a very complex landscape with multiple regulatory bodies and industry bodies as well. We found a very congested landscape with lots of initiatives that all make sense in isolation. But when you add them up together, I'm not sure that anyone has defined a clear vision. And the most important recommendation of this review, which has been accepted by the government, is that the government needs to develop a national vision and strategy for payments to ensure we've got the payments infrastructure and landscape to support a continually growing and leading economy.
So really a coherent approach rather than a piecemeal approach that it has been to date. That all sounds very sensible, but I guess at the heart of this is consumer protection. We all hear about the fraud and the scams and so on. How did that factor into your review?
Throughout the review, we've taken a very consumer focused approach. In fact, in our consultation, we listened to over 150 stakeholders directly. We ran round tables with not just, with banks, building societies, large tech, small tech, fintech, regulators, consumer groups, retailers, merchants, associations, and we even did direct research with the consumer. And consumer protection is important, so is convenience, so is security, so is resilience, so is speed. There are a whole variety of consumer needs, some of which can compete with each other. Convenience and security are perhaps some tension between those. But as we looked across the whole landscape, one thing's really clear. From a consumer perspective, as device-centric payments become more and more common, it raises important questions around financial inclusion and digital inclusion to ensure that all consumers can benefit from the very latest innovations while still being secure and protected appropriately.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that sounds like a very, very sound objective. Now, sadly, we don't have any more time, Joe, but for our viewers, you can hear about all these issues and many other related issues at the Payments Regulation and Innovation Summit on the 25th of January in London. We hope you can attend in person. Just remains for me to say, Joe, thank you very much for sharing those thoughts with us.
Thank you.